What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 164.
164.
On this Monday, April 7th, 2025. Our 2-week hiatus is over. We are back. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green with you. A lot to get to, and you haven't had a show for a couple of weeks. Catch up on some spring ball stuff. Of course, a big dismissal from the program, however you want to term that over the weekend. We'll get into that, of course. With Davon Mitchell no longer with Oklahoma, where does the tight end room sit now? We'll, of course, start with that in just a moment. The Crimson Combine, whatever that is this weekend, so we will look ahead to the final week of spring practice. We'll also get into the early part of the offseason for OU men's and women's basketball, and, of course, recap the weekends that were for the Diamond Sports as per usual. But, guys, let's start with football. We are in the last week of spring practice. The Crimson Combine is on Saturday, which, as everyone knows by now, is in place of the spring game. We'll talk about that a little bit as far as what we're going to be watching for whenever we get there on Saturday. But before we do that, let's start with the big news right now for OU football. Is Davon Mitchell's no longer with the program. So the tight end that is was the beacon of hope for this position. The former highly touted, he was once a 5-star, then reclassified up, was a 4-star when he signed. Obviously his freshman year, never saw the field. It was a little bit of a storyline we talked about throughout the year. Didn't play at all in the bowl game, which we all thought was bizarre at that time. And over the course of this spring, he's been around, he's been practicing, but it was kind of more of the same. Like, this guy's probably not going to be a big factor this season. And now, lo and behold, he's no longer with the program at all. Guys, we'll talk about the tight end room, kind of where it is now without Davon, who, like we said, was kind of that bright spot as this potential future star. But just reaction for you guys with this guy that it just didn't pan out, which is a shame because we all thought this was a guy who was going to be big time, and it just obviously didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, especially when you look back, like you said, very coveted 2025 prospect who reclassified to 2024. Never saw the field last year, wasn't even on the 2 deep at the start of the season. They had 4 guys on there that weren't him. Between Bauer Sharp, Jake Roberts, Caden Helms, and Cade McIntyre all appearing there. Didn't see the field in any games, not even the blowout against Maine, not the blowout against Temple, certainly not the bowl game, which, again, we talked about was a little bit of a surprise. And really, the thing that kind of comes to mind is, like, you look back when he officially signed with Oklahoma. Brent Venables called him the most important recruit in that class.
Yeah.
And 15, 16 months later, he's not with the team anymore. Didn't play a single snap. Just couldn't put it all together, was given some chances, given some opportunities, and just, he discussed it back in, I think it was the day after the bowl game where he put out a tweet that has since been deleted. Like, hey, people blaming the coaches and stuff for me not seeing the field. It's like,
right.
No, like it was my fault. Like, I put myself in a position to not play this season. And he owned that to his credit, but it is a little telling that he
change. Yeah.
Nothing's changed. He deleted that post, and now he's not even with the program anymore. So there's no other way to label it but disappointing.
I think it's going to be one of those biggest what ifs, one of those type of guys for Oklahoma. I mean, that's just what it is. Like, we saw this guy when he was being recruited. We saw him a couple of times, and he just looked like the perfect type of, this perfect body for a tight end that you really want to see on the field. And you just never got to see it. I mean, outside of him, his roster updates on his weight gains and whatnot, that's all we really heard of him throughout the entire of his existence with Oklahoma. That's very disappointing. And it makes you think, like, what was the point of graduating early? Like, for somebody like that, usually when you graduate early, there's a guy that's ready to go. He's ready to see the field now. And let's see what happens. It didn't work out like that for him. So that's one of the most disappointing parts about it, because I mean, we saw the talent on the film. I mean, he's a very talented guy. It just seems like maybe there was something, off the field that we weren't seeing, even as reporters weren't seeing and being discussed, which is the reason why he wasn't seeing the field. And, that's a very disappointing thing if that's the case, because I think it's going to make him he's one of the biggest what ifs. That's what it is for him. So that's the toughest part.
I was going to say, you mentioned the talent. I think when you look at the composition of that tight end room, that he is the most innately talented player in that room, the most physically gifted, but just wasn't able to put it all together. And it's a shame. You talked about his weight. He checked in this spring on the official roster at 275. That's closer to an offensive lineman than it is a tight end.
Yeah.
That's not what you want out of a guy who admittedly had his struggles last season, trying to adjust to the college game and the demands and picking up the offense and just the day-to-day routine that's required to be an SEC football player.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. I mean, not playing at all in the bowl game was really telling. It just, at the time, we talked about it after the game, and it just made no sense. Like, this guy must really be far from playing. And when we did the tight end stats report, talked about it then of like, this guy's going to go from not being able to play even in a bowl game or, like Tom said, in a blowout against Maine, to being like a featured tight end in the SEC. It seemed like asking a lot. And it just, a lot of people put this on Joe John Finley. The state of the room, it's fair. But this is a player that was given a lot of chances. And it just, missing workouts, just not doing what he needed to do off the field. And like Tom said, he put out that tweet and it felt like an acknowledgement and like, okay, he knows that he's not doing what he needs to do off the field. That's good. And it'll turn around. And it just didn't. They gave him every chance in the world and it just didn't work out. Wishing him the best. I imagine, because he is so talented, he will get another opportunity somewhere, probably of significant stature. That's just me speculating. And hopefully he makes the most of it, and we'll keep an eye out with him. But like James said, big what if. I certainly felt like he was going to be a big part of this team at some point in the near future, and we never even saw him, on the field. It's a shame. It's a shame. And now for you guys, again, we don't have to just regurgitate the tight end stats report that we already did a few weeks ago, but where does this leave the room and leave the position? I mean, you've got a lot of unknown commodities. Not that Davon Mitchell was a known commodity. He wasn't, but you can talk about these guys they brought in. Kind of funny that the OU football Twitter account tweets out a highlight of Will Huggins the day after this breaks, of course. John Locke comes in. Carson Kent, we've kind of talked about Kennesaw State. You still have Caden Helms. Where is this position right now? And what's the future of this position? It's just not in a great spot.
Yeah. Look, I think as far as moving forward this season, it looks like right now it's going to be Will Huggins, and we've seen Jaren Kanak get a lot of opportunities out there. And then I think right behind them, it's kind of, Carson Kent after that. The thing with like Caden Helms and Cade McIntyre is like, can those guys stay healthy enough to contribute? Because that's been their issue through their first, couple seasons on campus. They just have not been able to stay healthy and put it together. But I think right now you're looking at, Will Huggins, who, is a big body there, huge size, has FBS Power 5 experience.
That's the biggest one.
At Kansas, but he only, in 3 seasons, he caught 1 catch for 20 yards.
Right.
Did a little bit more at Pitt State last season, and then bless him, earned an opportunity to get back up to the Power 4 level. We'll see what he can do at Oklahoma, but I think it's between him and Jaren Kanak, who again, until a couple months ago, was a linebacker for 3 seasons. You like Jaren Kanak's athleticism. You like some of the physicality that he has from having played linebacker, but it's still a new position to him. He hasn't played offense since his senior year of high school. But it's tough. Like on the surface, you look at Davon Mitchell and the the potential and the talent that he had, and you're like, oh man, that's a tough loss. But then you kind of take a step back. It's like, this dude never played a snap. It's not like he was on, the top of the 2 deep this spring either.
No.
So like, it's not a huge loss, when you look big picture. It's just a incredible disappointment for unfulfilled potential for a guy that, again, Brent Venables thought that, said he was the most important signee in that 2024 class. It's just tough. But, to me, that tight end position is still the biggest question mark on this team, with or without Davon Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. I think Will Huggins probably gets a start as of right now from what we've seen. He's looked pretty good. He has the experience with Kansas, experience with Pitt State, which is a very good Division II program out there in Kansas. So I think that's going to work out well for him. But now you kind of, want to see what happens. I mean, I wouldn't be even opposed to putting, Yvonne Carrion out there, for possession catches and things like that. I mean, he looked really good in the bowl game for the routes that he was running. It's more like, those button hooks, those turnarounds, getting those quick possession catches that you need. And I think he could do that too. So like, that's kind of like the wild card, think about something like that. But as you talked about, I think Will Huggins is going to be the guy as of right now, just from what I've seen.
Yeah, and that was widely speculated when they signed Kerryon, just because he's just so big, and he played well in the bowl game. So I don't know. I mean, you got to get creative. We'll see. Maybe Jaren Kinnick, we all know he's an athlete. Maybe it can work. It just seems like it's asking a lot for him to be your featured tight end. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Like Tom said, a lot of question marks. A lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the thing like between Kinnick and kind of the rest of those guys in that room is that Kinnick is the smallest tight end that they have right now.
Yep.
He's more of kind of a H-back type, not a natural tight end. We'll see how they kind of use him. I could see them having different roles for, him compared to Will Huggins. I don't think they're going to necessarily be asked to do the same things. But again, to me, it's just the biggest question mark on that offense or defense period. Is that tight end position still?
And it's weird because you're going to see like each guy has their own specialty. Like we kind of know that each guy's better at this than the other guy. And I think, opposing teams may catch on to that if it becomes that. Like if they know that, Avon Kerryon's in there, it's like, okay, they're going to try to pass the ball here. If it's Derek Simmons or something like that, a guy like that in there, it's like, oh, it's going to be a blocking scheme type of situation. So it's like, you don't want it to be picked up like that. So it's kind of like you want to find the guy that's going to be the 3-down guy for you. I mean, you got to find that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know right now, but I guess it's Will Huggins at this point in time.
We'll figure it out. They still have obviously another week here and then fall camp to try and sift through. And maybe they look to add another one in the portal. Maybe, who knows? I mean, you just dropped one, so it's conceivable that you could add another one here coming up in the portal when the spring portal window opens. Something to keep an eye on there as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm interested in what that position looks like at the end of spring, because with the way that the roster limits are capped now with 105 players, and Oklahoma's still over that limit, and they still have 2 freshmen coming in, they're going to have some attrition this spring. Can you carry that many tight ends as they have on the roster right now? Because they've got McIntyre, Helms, Huggins, Locke,
Kent,
and
Trinae Washington.
And Trinae Washington.
Right, yeah, Trinae Washington.
They have 7 tight ends. Is that feasible in the current state, or are we going to see some more attrition there at the end of spring? And if that's the case, unless a instant impact tight end comes along and is available in the portal that you can find the NIL package for, I don't know if they can really afford to add one just from a roster construction standpoint, because I think there are some other needs that they need to fill just from a depth perspective.
Sure. No, that's a good point. You start to add up the names. It's a laundry list.
Yeah.
Someone to step up there. And we will get a chance to see these guys kind of on Saturday, the Crimson Combine. So it's on Saturday. It's 1:00. The 3 of us are going to be there at the stadium. I love to give you a good idea of what this is actually going to look like, but we don't know. It's a new thing. It's replaced the spring game. I can read you real quick the way it was phrased, if for any fans tuned in that, like, what actually is this going to be? Here's what they said it's going to be. The OU football team will take the field at 1. Position groups consisting of offensive and defensive linemen, linebackers, defensive backs, and quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends will complete a series of drills designed for each group. That just makes it sound like it's going to be practice, basically, that you can watch. That's essentially what it's probably going to be. But, I mean, if the guys are out there in uniform, I'm guessing, or at least practice uniforms, running drills, materials thrown around, it's a little intriguing, I guess. Is there anything you guys are watching for here at all going into Saturday, as far as I want to see what this guy or this position, again, it's hard to know what it's actually going to look like because we've never done this before. But if there's a headline for you or storyline going in, what would it be?
Yeah, I have no idea what to look for, because I don't know what this format's going to be. Like you said, reading it off, it sounds kind of like some of what we've seen in practice. Like even last week, we got to see some one-on-one red zone opportunities where John Mateer was throwing to receivers and tight ends against, cornerbacks, against safeties, against linebackers. So we might see that. They do the bull in the ring thing where it's a, offensive lineman against a defensive lineman in a pass rushing drill. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of those types of reps again too. And if that's the case, like, I would like to see how some of these offensive linemen continue to hold up against, the better pass rushers on this team, like R. Mason Thomas or PJ Adebawore or Marvin Jones Jr., like how those offensive tackles in particular, just because, obviously Logan Howland's been out this spring. They're replacing the starters at right tackle too. So I want to see how that pass pro kind of holds up in those drills, if that is what we're going to see.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, it just seems like another practice, type of format. I mean, from what we get to see when we go out there for 20 minutes at a time, it's just like the position groups doing their own things. And when you read the release, that's exactly what it says. So it's like this is more a fan service than it is for like something for us to digest as reporters to see what's going on, because this is exactly what we get to see always. Now, if they do go through those one-on-ones, like we briefly saw that in the last practice. If they do go through that, that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to see. Okay, this guy beat this guy. This guy beat, he handled this situation this way. But based on the release, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen at all. It said position groups, going through their workouts, and so that would be disappointing. So maybe this is just fan service. It's just for the fans to go out there and see what the guys look like instead of just going off of what our video shows and what our perspective is on these guys, see it for themselves, and maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, the way it read to me is that it's going to be like offensive lineman and defensive lineman, and then you'll have like the quarterback and then the skill players type setup. So I'm curious to see how it all shakes out. Like, this is the first time they're doing it. It seems like that they might not even know exactly what they're going to be doing yet, but they had to put out something just to like let people know kind of what to expect in terms of some sort of format and just like schedule of events. So we'll see how it goes. But even if we see some special teams, it's like those kickers have struggled out there when we've been out there at practice and seen them. I would like to see a little bit of consistency from those guys, because we've seen what it looks like when the kicking game is not good for Oklahoma. And even last year, Zach Schmidt, emerged late in the year and kind of shook off some of those struggles from the prior 2 years, but it was shaky at times with that kicking game, and that's something that they need to shore up. So we'll see what all happens this weekend, but I just don't know what to expect right now.
We don't really get to see guys like react and make decisions based on what the rest of the other 10 guys are doing, on the field, on the side of the ball. Like when you have the spring game, you kind of see that all those nuances, start to pick up. Maybe a guy slips on his route. Quarterback has to, look the other way. You don't really get to see that now. It's just like, if it's just throwing the ball to the wide open receiver with nobody covering him, I mean, that's just what we see in practice, man. So it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
That's the disappointing part about it.
No, I'm just really more interested, can they make it entertaining at all? I mean, I talked about it with Colin back at the time, but the three of us didn't talk about it on the show. Whenever they canceled the spring game, the fans hate this. The fans hate that the spring game got canceled. I wasn't really, honestly, just totally sure how that was going to go over. Whenever they announced that they were canceling the spring game and doing this instead, I kind of wondered, will fans care really? Or will they kind of be like, whatever? Fans hated that they got rid of the spring game. Our message boards, I mean, it was pretty clear where the fans kind of stood on it. So if they follow that up with, there's only supposed to be an hour long, by the way, 1 to 2. The 2 to 3 is players are going to sign autographs and stuff. So we're only supposed to be doing stuff for an hour. If that hour that fans paid tickets to see, this thing should be free, by the way, but fans are paying to see, if it's nothing, I mean, fans are not, it's going to be extra. I mean, it's going to be a PR loss. So we'll see. It's a new thing. Go in with an open mind as best we can. But I don't know what we're all going to be there, the three of us, and we'll have coverage as best we can. I don't know I don't think anybody really knows what to expect. And like Tom said, I don't even know if OU really knows what to expect or what they're fully going to be doing coming up here in just a few days. It's a new thing for everyone, I guess, but we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, if you're going to like get rid of the spring game altogether, don't do some half measure type event to replace it. Just have a full on practice, open it to the fans. Like, if you want to charge for tickets, do like $5 or something like that.
Yeah,
and then do what you can to limit video, because I'm sure that's that's the big paranoia part with all of this with the spring game, is that you don't want with the portal and NIL and all that stuff, you don't want somebody to like put something on film and then all of a sudden another program's coming knocking on the door and trying to tamper and, lure a guy into the portal and get him away from your team. So if you want to avoid that, but still want to provide something of value for the fans, just have an open practice.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. As far as, fans ask a lot. It's been kind of a trendy thing, playing another school in the spring or just the spring game even coming back as we know it. Hard to see it until the post-spring portal window just like either goes away or they are able to change. It's probably this is the way it'll be. At least, again, until if they can make the proper tweaks, then it could, possibly come back. But we'll see.
Like the inter-squad scrimmages that, Dion was trying to get going with Colorado and other coaches have talked about for the last few years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We'll see. Hard to see until as long as the post-spring portal window is the way it is now. Hard to see. Basically is where I sit on that.
Because even if you do the scrimmage, it's still the exact same thing that you were worried about doing your own spring game. Like it was about other teams seeing your guys in action. So I mean,
no doubt.
I mean, it'd be the best. It'd be the best.
Injury as a big.
Yeah.
It's the portal window. That's All right, so we'll be there on Saturday at the stadium. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. We will have coverage, whatever that looks like. They are expected to make potentially Brent Venables and players available to us afterwards, so there will be a post game, if you want to call it that. And we'll have coverage from Norman on Saturday with whatever we glean from it. So be sure to keep up on the YouTube channel and over on the website, oklahoma247sports.com. As OU wraps up the spring. And we're also going to have practice availability on Wednesday this week as well. So we got some more spring ball stuff before the Crimson Combine coming up on Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. Let's shift over to hoops. The offseason is underway for Porter Moser and Jenny Baranchek's squads. We'll start with the men. Tom, obviously we haven't had a show in 2 weeks, so a lot has happened since we did the show right after they lost to UConn and the season ended. I'm not going to go through every single thing, talk about each one because it would take an hour probably. But I'm just going to kind of – what's the storyline for you so far of the offseason? They added their first transfer today in Tay Davis from Notre Dame. They've had – obviously, a lot of guys have hit the portal. Nobody that surprising really other than maybe Duke Miles. We talked about he could maybe be back for another year. He's in the portal. Sounds like Mo Wagi is going to come back. Everything else, I think, is pretty expected. Guys you thought would leave, guys you thought would stay. It's about what we all thought. We also, since our last show, Trae Young announced as the assistant GM of the program, something that Steph Curry is also doing at Davidson. So that's very exciting and kind of a cool thing. Not really sure what that'll look like in the long term, but it's exciting to at least get Trae Young's name back with the program. And then the other thing is the fact that, Porter Moser looks like he's staying, right? And right before the break, we talked about his name with Villanova. They've since made a hire. Texas A&M opened. He has a lot of history there. He's met his wife there, as he talked about this season. They've since made a hire, so it looks like Porter Moser will be back for a fifth year. Tom, for you, early part of the offseason, what's kind of the thing that stands out to you as the most notable, I guess, of everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I think the Trae Young thing certainly stands out. Not just that he's doing the assistant GM thing, but that he donated $1 million to the program to help kind of kickstart that. We've talked about the funding and needing the resources to be able to build a competitive roster in the SEC. So that's a step in the right direction. And obviously, we'll see how things shake out with the house settlement and the rev share and all that stuff, and what Oklahoma kind of looks like from a competitive standpoint there. But, bringing Trae Young, and look, a lot of it is like just having a figurehead in there. But the fact that he moved to Jordan Brand back in November, and now, Oklahoma is obviously a Jordan Brand school, makes that partnership easier to facilitate, and that he's going to have a hand in kind of pitching these prospects, whether it's high school guys or transfer portal players, and shaping this roster. I think that's really interesting. And then, like you mentioned, they picked up their first transfer earlier today, Tay Davis. We talked about him on the board a little bit last week, but this is a big pickup for Oklahoma. 6'9" forward. Seems like a guy that's basically going to be a Jalen Moore fill-in. Averaged 15 points, 5+ rebounds a game last season at Notre Dame. Was one of the most improved players in the ACC this year. He's a he's a high major transfer, so he's got experience there. He started his career at Seton Hall, spent the last couple seasons at Notre Dame. He's got 1 year of eligibility left, but he is a impact type player. Number 37 player in the portal per our rankings. I think he was the third or fourth best available forward as of this morning. Like, this is a guy that a lot of programs wanted. And for Oklahoma to be able to pull him, that's huge. Now he's still keeping his name in the NBA draft right now.
Sure.
Go through that, see if he can get a guaranteed deal. But, just based on, it seems like he will end up at Oklahoma.
Right.
Barring just a complete change of his kind of NBA stock. But it's a good starting point for Oklahoma. And, they still have 6 spots to fill. They need a couple guards. There's some names to watch. Nigel Pack from Miami, who started his career at Kansas State.
Big name there, yeah.
That's a big name to keep an eye on. I know they had Frankie Collins from TCU on campus last week. I believe Jermichael Stillwell from Milwaukee is scheduled to come in the next week or so. So there's definitely some names to monitor and some talented guys to boot. Like, they're not scraping the bottom of the barrel right now. Like, they are trying to be competitive for some of these better names that are in the portal and try to build the roster around that. And I think that the addition of Trae Young as assistant GM and his donation was a step in the right direction toward them being able to get in there for some of these guys.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. It's a huge offseason. And it's been interesting because, you were there in Raleigh, and Porter also did an interview at the Final Four just a few days ago where he kind of got asked about, kind of the future of Oklahoma, and he goes right to the resources. I'm paraphrasing. It's not what he said, but like the resources stink, basically. Like, they need to be a lot better.
He said they're moving in the right direction. And this was just a few days after the Trae Young news too. So
yeah.
Message received.
The Trae Young thing, I feel like that is like it is a step in the right direction. Like, it really is. And a bit of a statement of like Oklahoma getting a little more serious about it, because that's something that's been, right or wrong, a big part of the conversation among the fan base, certainly the last couple of years. Does OU care about basketball? Or are they invested in being good at basketball and really trying to win at a high level? That's been a question among the fan base. Again, fair or not, that's been out there. And so the early part of this offseason, you bring Trae Young in, he makes that big donation. You just land a nice, coveted prospect in Tate Davis. It's like, okay, you've got a little bit of excitement. Mo Wagi sounds like he's coming back. Obviously, Dayton Forsythe's coming back. You knew that. So you've got some breadcrumbs here. We'll see what else they can do in the portal. By my roster map, they still have 6 spots, so they have a lot to work with, and we'll see what they can do with it. But it's a big offseason. Porter is back, it looks like, obviously, unless a job opening that we don't know of comes available that he becomes a candidate for. But it looks like he's back for year 5. You have a little momentum off of last year, finally making the tournament. Can you build on it and get a good portal class in here and roll? It's very early, but it's off to a good start. You remember this time last year, they didn't get their first transfer. It was Kobe Elvis, I think, was their first transfer last year. It was like not until, when was that? It was like May, I think.
Yeah, I didn't remember when it was.
It was long. It might have
been late April or like early May.
It was long. We were at the point we were on this show saying, like, are they going to field a team? Like, it was crazy. The fact to get on the board with someone notable pretty quick before the Natty is at least a nice change of pace there.
If I recall, I think the portal window might have opened later last year too. I don't remember exactly when the window was, but it was a longer window, and it might have opened later too. I can't recall. But again, look, on the surface, you're not bringing back a lot in terms of contributions from this year's team. Like, you're bringing back 2 rotation players right now, Dayton Forsythe and Mo Wagi.
Sure.
But keep in mind, Jeff Nwanko announced he's returning. He was probably going to be a starter for the team this year before he tore his Achilles. So you get him back. Jadon Jones, all indications right now are that he'll be back too. Another guy who was probably going to, at least vie for a starting job. Is not
maybe start, yeah,
maybe start, but definitely be a 3-and-D, like kind of a Latrey Darthur, Rivaldo Suarez type player that from the year before. So you have 4 pieces back. You're bringing in a couple solid freshmen. Kai Rogers is a guy who's probably going to have a chance to have a decent role in the rotation. Alec Blair, another really well thought of guy who's a forward, but can be kind of a point forward, do some ball handling for them. And then you bring in Tay Davis and, try to fill out this roster. It's like, yeah, you need to bring in 7 transfers, but it's not like last year where it just seemed like everybody was like jumping ship. Like, you're not losing a lot in terms of transfer portal guys. Like Yaya Kita is gone. Jacob Fredson Cole, that one stings a little bit just because he was a really coveted recruit, but in 2 years just didn't really do much. So like the writing was kind of on the wall there. Luke Northweather obviously was a rotational piece the last 2 years, but we saw what he just wasn't a viable option against some of these bigger guys in the SEC. So I'm curious. He just committed to Missouri yesterday. I'm curious what that's going to look like for him. Obviously it's good for him in his home state. He's from Jefferson City, but what does that? How does that still work? Because he's still going to be in the SEC. He's still going to have some of the same problems going against some of these bigger, more physical forwards. But again, outside of Duke Miles, you're not losing anybody who was really impactful for this team last year in terms of transfers. So. Sure. Tay Davis is a good start. That recruiting class is a good start. Getting Trey Young in that $1 million donation is a good start. We'll see if they can kind of build some momentum and get a couple more guys on board.
No doubt. We didn't mention it, but I mean, it goes without saying, Jeremiah Fears did enter the draft, which was widely expected.
Yeah.
He's in the draft, so he moves on. And I will also mention too, just for the sake of bringing it up, there is some thought from what I've kind of been told, Alec Blair could sign. He's a really good baseball player, could sign out of high school, might not make it to college. That's a possibility. It's not a definite, but it is something to keep in mind. Obviously, Kai Rogers is kind of the coveted guy of the class. I think Milwaukee starts. Kai Rogers backup 5.
Yeah, I think right now.
Probably.
Especially with what
Mo down the stretch.
Especially with what Mo showed you those last 3 or 4 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
If he can stay out of foul trouble and just continue to kind of develop his game, I think he is a viable starter in the SEC, which, none of us really expected a year ago when he signed, even though he was coming from Alabama. I was impressed with what I saw from him down the stretch. Maybe he just needs like the whole season to be Ramadan for him to like play out of his mind, because his discipline during that month is just, really impressive, and it shows on the court. So if he can find a way to harness that, throughout a whole season, I think Oklahoma will be in a better shape in the front court. Obviously, they need more length. You're getting that in Kai Rogers. You're getting that in Tay Davis. If they can get a guy like JaMychal Stillwell, who was a top 10 rebounder in the country this season, that goes a long way toward kind of filling one of those needs that really they struggled with this past year. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious to see how the rest of this roster kind of shakes out, but they need another, front court piece. They need a couple guards, and then just kind of fill it out from there.
No doubt. So we'll see. Obviously, a lot more spots to play with. We'll keep an eye on it. Lots of coverage over at Oklahoma.247sports.com. Continue to watch the portal as they look to make some more additions there and kind of get that roster ready. Obviously, make another run at it next year, year 5 for Porter. James, on the women's side, obviously not as much. There's not going to be massive roster turnover here. Not expected to be, at least. You did have one hop in the portal in Raina Scott, who's obviously a notable player. Since our last show, they lost to UConn, who went on to win the national title easily. So no shame in that loss. They actually had a lead at halftime in that game, which just that alone is impressive kind of in hindsight. They, since the last time we had a show, signed the number 1 player, or didn't sign, but got a commitment from the number 1 player in the country at the high school level, Nalia Chavez, which, big NIL package, could win almost anywhere she wants, expected to be a star at the next level. So she comes aboard, will be an immediate impact next year on the team. And they bring back basically everyone else. For you, early offseason kind of storyline there. I mean, they've only lost one in the portal. They add Chavez. You're bringing a lot of the team back. It seems like it's not going to be that busy of an offseason for them. It seems like it's more just kind of progressing forward. Is that kind of how you see it a little bit too?
Well, they've lost 3 in the portal. They've lost one that is one of the main pieces.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they've lost Kirsten Johnson and Landry Allen as well. Yeah. But I think the vibes at Oklahoma are immaculate, as I think that's something you say a lot, Josh. Immaculate is what you say. That's what it is right now. Oklahoma won 11 of the last 13 games to end the season. The two teams that beat them in that span were the two teams that were playing in the national championship game. Just yesterday.
Right.
And so like you see that, and then you bring in Aaliyah Chavez, the number one player, and on every metric from every different site has said she's the number one player. And you look at what she's done, through her high school career, through what she did in the McDonald's All-American game. She's a 3-level scorer who plays fast and plays aggressive, which is exactly what Jenny Baranczyk has always wanted to do. That's exactly the play style that she wants, and that's a big reason why Aaliyah Chavez chose Oklahoma over Texas and Texas Tech.
Texas Tech.
That's a big factor in all of this. And so when you have that, the way you finish the season, as well as you played, the bringing in this type of recruit along with a 4-star guard and a 4-star forward as well in that recruiting class.
Sure. It's
like, this is a really, really good situation for you to be in. I think that's a lot of what OU is pitching to other, players in the portal. It's a very good situation right now. And so that's the way I see it. Now, what I do think Oklahoma needs in the portal, they need more athleticism. I mean, that was apparent into when they were trying to guard these top teams, like I mentioned with South Carolina and UConn. They just didn't have enough athleticism, it seemed like. So if you can find one or two more Sahara Williams type players to be, forwards on your squad, that is going to make everything a lot better. Because like I said, they want to play fast. So you need athletic players to do that. And you have Aaliyah Chavez leading that. Peyton Verhulst coming back, which we didn't know it at the time, but her getting that extra year of eligibility early in the season, that is like bringing in a 4 or 5-star guard, like in this situation. Like, that was exactly what OU needed. And so, like, you have that stability with her, with Reagan Beers returning. You have the stability that you need. And so I think it's just going to be a really exciting year for OU women's basketball. Like, this could be it. Like, this could be a team that really competes for a national championship. They got all the way to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament this season, and I think they're going to be a lot better overall. Like you mentioned, Raina Scott was in the portal. That was a little bit of a surprise, in terms of what she's done and what she's accomplished, because she started off the bench early in the season and then worked her way into the starting lineup.
Yeah,
and she just looked good. Defensively, she was getting so much better along with her scoring abilities, and so that was a bit of surprise. But OU just like, with the guards they're bringing in, it's going to be just fine. That they've already reloaded based on the class they're bringing in. So that's a good situation. So in the transfer portal, it's going to be about bringing in those athletic forwards that you really need. Maybe bringing in one more center, because you only have 2 on the roster with Reagan Beers and Beatrice Culleton. You're going to need another center to go along with that. So that's really where I see it. It's kind of like the big man of the roster for them.
Yeah, it wouldn't seem to me you need a ton, with how much you're bringing back. So you can kind of get greedy. You can kind of go for bigger names and really kind of specialize what's going to make us better. Like, you know what I mean? You don't need a ton. So you don't have to allocate a lot of resources, a lot of different places. Kind of think of like the way you saw OU football approach on the defensive side. Like, they didn't need a ton, so they were able to put a lot into Marvin Jones and Kendall. Like, kind of a similar mindset. Because you're bringing back so many key pieces of the team, and you add Aaliyah Chavez, and I'll add too. And not that most OU fans don't realize it, because I'm sure they do, but getting Aaliyah Chavez, I mean, she's number one player, so I'm not saying anything that's not obvious, but that is a major statement of kind of the direction of the program, and just the fact that Jenny Baranczyk and they could pull together the resources, the money, the NIL needed to get a player like that, and she is looked at and considered. Like, what we just saw what Paige Beckers did, or Juju Watkins, like that's what she's thought of as, like, going to be one of those types of star guard players. We'll see how it pans out. She's a high school player right now, but I'll tell you what, you watch like 2 minutes of highlights and you see it. The way she can handle the ball and shoot, that it's going to be exciting. And I would imagine that fans are going to be very excited to see her next year. So it's a fun team, and I'm excited to see them next season, but great year and in good shape to build on it.
Yeah. I was going to say, while we were talking about both basketball teams, Oklahoma basketball announced that officially all 5 of those guys will be back next season. Dayton Forsyth, Mo Agee, Jadon Jones, Jeff Wonko, and Koala Talk. So they got those 5 back, 3 signees plus Tay Davis, who they signed, who committed earlier today. So that's a good building block there. Obviously, being able to retain those 5 guys, certainly, Jadon Jones being the most newsworthy one there, just because he hadn't said it officially, even though he kind of hinted at it when I spoke to him at the NCAA tournament a couple weeks ago. But those 5 are officially back for Oklahoma. So
big time. I mean, you talk about it. They're still having to replace a ton, but to bring a lot of those guys back, they haven't really been doing that under Porter. So a lot more kind of continuity.
Grow old together.
Yeah, grow old, as Porter likes to say.
Yeah.
So, good news there. And then, back on the women's side, excited to see Aaliyah Chavez get in there. And you felt like it was whenever she went to the second round game against Iowa on her own dime, just went and sat in the stands and watched OU beat the brakes off Iowa. And then she was going to maybe go to the Texas game the next day and didn't. It was like, okay, feeling pretty good about this. And there you have it. So big time stuff and a great year and looking to build on it. So some good early vibes for both teams, both programs in the early part of the off season. I think that's it for now. We'll let Tom hop out. James and I will wrap up the show with some Diamond Sports, softball and baseball as we move into April. So getting kind of into the home stretch really of both regular seasons, postseason kind of on the horizon for both. So we'll get into that now. But, Tom, we'll see you on Wednesday at football practice.
Later, guys.
See you.
All right, we're now shifting to the Diamond Sports portion of the program. James covers softball. I cover baseball. We'll start first with softball. James, I feel like the weekend they just had is kind of like a whatever weekend. It was a break from SEC play. It was weird. The weather messed with the schedule. Shifted around. They played the game on Thursday against St. Thomas, which Patty Gasswood didn't coach, which was weird. She had a prior engagement. That was a strange thing. But UCF on Friday, the game on Saturday got canceled. I don't know. You can talk about the weekend, obviously, a little bit, but obviously I think more of the attention is looking forward. Big week. Oklahoma State on Wednesday, and then Alabama in Tuscaloosa on the weekend. Obviously, the first SEC series for Oklahoma since they lost 2 out of 3 from Tennessee the weekend prior. I guess a little, State of the Union. We haven't had a show in a couple of weeks for you, so we haven't talked since that Tennessee series. And again, the weekend they just had, you can talk about it if you want. I don't know how much was really learned, but this week is another big one. Got some big opportunities with obviously the Pokes, and then going on the road to Alabama. Where are you kind of at with this team right now after a series loss and now another big week ahead?
For this week, I'll just be quick. I mean, it was just good to see Ella Parker, have the grand slam that she had, and Aja Lowry get back in the circle. That's pretty much the biggest takeaways from the weekend. Sure. It's just those 2 players that have been hurt, playing injured, getting back out there. Now, let's go to the Tennessee series, which is a lot more important, I think, because of, the way it happened. Like, okay, so this is what it was going into the game. Caroline Pickens, the pitcher for Tennessee, threw the fastest pitch in NCAA softball history. It was recorded, and that was the big thing.
Right.
So going into the game, OU and their staff, all they were doing was trying to prepare for that situation. They were like, we're going to put the machine up as high as it goes. Let's see if we can, let's figure this out. And so Tennessee goes out and throws a different pitcher to start the first game. And it kind of threw OU off a little bit. They didn't jump on that pitcher the way they should have, getting ready for Caroline Pickens. So then once OU fell behind, Tennessee just brought Caroline Pickens in the game. And then so she just took over and shut OU down because she consistently was throwing like 74 miles per hour. We're sitting next to the Tennessee SID, the OU SID. They get these stats as the pitchers are coming in, and they're just shouting them out like, this is insane what she's doing out here. Like that's very, very fast. It's over 100 miles an hour if you're thinking about it in baseball terms.
Yeah, if you adjust it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it was very difficult for them to catch up to that. And so they just lost the confidence, it felt like, in that first game. So that they really needed to win this series. Like in game 2, Caroline Pickens didn't throw. Tennessee was just getting her ready for game 3. And OU won game 2 as they should have. But in game 3 came around and Caroline Pickens threw the entire game. And like, so they just never caught up to that. And so when I say all that, I'm saying I'm still fine with the way this OU team has been playing this season. I don't doubt what's going on. I think Tennessee just had like the ultimate trump card in terms of a player to go out there and really do something, against that team. And Tennessee really wanted it. They wanted it really, really bad. I mean, they were dogpiling after winning that series. Yeah. Like it was just like they, even Patty Gasso said it said that she was like, yeah, it looks like they had won the national championship, and you love to see stuff like that because it shows the type of team that we are, the program that we built. When somebody beats us, it's like a big thing, which it is. I mean, that's the third time, that they've ever lost a 3-game series since they began in the Big 12. Like it's insane the run that they've been on, from what's happened. So that was the biggest takeaway from it. I don't think the offense was just all of a sudden bad, or Sam Landry would just had a bad outing. I think it was just like Tennessee had an ultimate trump card, and they played their best. Now, can they do that in the postseason? That's kind of the sentiment Patty Gasso was saying. Like she was like, "This is only March. This ain't May. We're going to be all right. We can figure this out." And I think that's the way to look at it. Is okay. Now you see, what's coming for you, and so they got to withstand that. Now I know they got a bunch of tough series coming up to end this season. Alabama, Mississippi State, Texas, and then Florida. We know Texas and Florida being the 2 teams that were projected ahead of OU. Yeah. That's going to be really fun to see how they finish this season, because now it's time. You've had the growing pains. You've had the time to figure your team out. Now it's time to do that. And so this is what they need to do now.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you weren't going to win every series in the SEC. The conference is too good. And with, we talked about going into the year, as much as Oklahoma was replacing, young team, going to need some time to figure it out probably. And they got off to this, obviously a phenomenal start. And it was insane. They're still really good. But it just, you knew, like at some point, they're probably going to drop a series. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the SEC. It's just, it's going to happen. Would you prefer not have it happen at home? Certainly. You want to try and take advantage of your home series with obviously OU's home crowd. It is one of the best in the country. But, I really have a hard time smashing any sort of panic button when you lose 2 out of 3 to Tennessee. It was a really good program, really good team. We'll see how they bounce back this week. You got Oklahoma State. It's a 1-game midweek matchup over in Oklahoma City. Then you go to Tuscaloosa. You got some big series here still coming up, obviously, down the home stretch of the regular season before the postseason starts. They're still in a great spot. They're still obviously rock solid, cemented as a host, and then probably, still in great shape as a super regional host as well. So you're still in really good shape. And I think there's still a lot to be encouraged by. It was just a little bit of like a reminder that, okay, the SEC is really good, lots of good teams, and this team is not as dominant as what we're used to because they had replaced so much, which we already really knew. So I really don't make too much of it on my end, at least. And we'll see what they do this week. I mean, you don't want to just pile up series losses. You want to get back on track. It's a big week. I think if you can go get 3 games this week in these 4, I think you're right back to feeling pretty good about things. So we'll see. But a big week coming up, and excited to see Bedlam come back this week, and then obviously getting out there to Tuscaloosa for a big weekend there as well. So should be fun.
I think another thing to point out too was as reporters, we love stories. And so in game 1, Sophia Nugent is the one that hit the home run to and like she was a former OU, player. And so it was a big thing. It was a big deal to her to, come back and beat her former team. And so she hit the home run, that was a good story, pretty much. And when you look at it, it's like, I'm not saying Carolina Pickens was like the unstoppable pitcher or anything like that. I think she just played her best during that weekend because OU also had a lead in game 3 against Carolina Pickens. Like it just all fell apart in 1 inning with 2 outs. Like it just fell apart for OU, and it just didn't come back from that. And so that was the big gut punch, in terms of that series. But I think if it played again, OU definitely could win it. If they played their best too.
For sure. And you mentioned Sophia Nugent. I saw someone mention at the time. I can't remember who. I can't give proper credit, but it's kind of the year of former OU players because you had Theo Weiss, obviously in football, the big touchdown late for Missouri in that game, which was obviously a loss. Now Tega Owa did it to OU basketball twice. And now Sophia Nugent, for whatever reason, former Sooners have had a lot of success this year facing off with OU, which is just cruel, but it's how it goes sometimes, I like your like you're talking about cruelty too. Obviously the OU fans. I liked your tweet last night about it was like the graphic that that was me. Yeah. The Final Four. Yeah. Throw up a graphic in the middle of the Final Four, just completely unprompted of programs with the most Final Four appearances without a national title. Of course, OU is on that list with 5. If Houston wins, they'll chop off, and OU will be tied for the most with Illinois, which just mean. Just OU fans trying to just kick back and watch the Final Four. Not something they needed to see.
Yeah.
There's a strong argument to be made that OU basketball is the best program to have never won a national title. That's very, very. You can make that argument pretty solidly, honestly. Yeah. Not something they need to be reminded of on a random Final Four night. As Kelvin Sampson looks like he might win a national title tonight, but we digress. On the other side of the diamond, the baseball side, rough weekend, obviously. LSU came in Norman and swept Oklahoma. It was miserable weather all weekend. It was cold. It was windy. It was rainy. We thought for all the world going into the weekend that the schedule was going to be altered. It actually never was, by kind of a miracle, but just a rough weekend. The offense just never could get it going. Now, and I feel like I want to say everything off the top. LSU is really good. LSU is very, very good. That's a top 5 team. That's a team that everyone looks at as a definite Omaha team. And, so it's not like you lost a chopped liver here by any means. But, you never want to get swept at home against anyone. I think, anyone would tell you that with on the team or the coaching staff. I mean, that goes without saying. But they just couldn't get it going offensively. And they had guys on base all weekend. They just could never cash in. The numbers with runners in scoring position were really rough over the course of this series. The bright spot is they pitched pretty well. Kyson Witherspoon was excellent again on Thursday night, the first game. Just got outdueled by Cade Anderson, who threw a complete game shutout. First complete game shutout against OU since 2015. But it's been quite a while. It's not something you get a lot of in college baseball, really modern baseball in general. And they just, Kate Crossland, outside of one inning, was pretty good on Friday. And then Malachi Witherspoon had his best start in weeks on Saturday. They just couldn't quite get the offense revved up. And it doesn't help that the weather was terrible. They had a lot of balls that were hit pretty well that just kind of got caught up in the wind that, probably on a better weather day might get out, or at least be in the gap that when it's cold and windy, wind in your face, you get it hard. It just doesn't go anywhere, right? So LSU is playing in the same weather, so it's not really an excuse. It's much more just kind of the way it goes sometimes. It was a bad weekend. They know that. You got to get back on track. And it's the SEC, just like in basketball, just like in football, it's unforgiving. Every weekend is tough. It's not any different this week. They have Dallas Baptist tomorrow night, who's always been tough on OU. They'll play them in Norman. And then Vanderbilt comes to Norman. Vanderbilt's also a top 20 team coming in this weekend. So more opportunities ahead. I don't think you're smashing the panic button just yet. But, you lost to Alabama the weekend before. So your first 2 series losses have come in back-to-back. You've lost 5 of your last 6 in SEC play. And this weekend was rough. I mean, it just was, right? So we'll see how they respond to it. I imagine they'll respond well. The weather's going to be a lot better this week. And so that'll help just the morale and get the crowds back out there and everything like that. There was a ton of LSU fans who came into town for this, and especially on Saturday when the weather was just horrid. They're all in town. Like, they're going to the game. And OU fans really came out pretty well. I
was going to ask about that. How the OU fans,
especially on Saturday, it was about a 50-50 crowd. And it really wasn't much of a home field advantage because the weather was so poor. And LSU had so many fans in town. I'd never seen anything like it for road fans at Mitchell Park. So we'll see this week, better weather and things like that. You want to get back on track. Kind of same thing I just said for softball. You'll get 3 out of 4 this week. I feel like, you feel really good about things and you're right back on track. Like Skip Johnson said himself post-game on Saturday, this team has hit all year long. Okay, they've scored runs. It hasn't been a problem. It was a bad series. But for now, you can write it off as a bad. I think that's fair to say it was a bad series and you move forward from it. But you want to, you got to turn it around quick. And it doesn't get any easier because the SEC is so unforgiving. Every series is so tough. So, but a bad weekend, obviously. And we'll see how they bounce back from it coming up this week. Tough week again with DBU and then Vanderbilt. So we'll see. Lots of coverage to come. We'll be down in Norman.
How much were you paying attention to all this as well with your own, things going on?
I was there. I was in Norman for the LSU.
Well, I know this last one, but before the Alabama series, I think was.
Oh yeah, I had it on. Tom handled the coverage for me while I was out, but I had it on, usually on a laptop or something, kind of checking the score at the very least. They were right in that Bama series. All 3 games were close. They easily could have won that series. Yeah, I guess Alabama's really good. LSU just kind of, they're really good. They're really good. It's kind of LSU, Tennessee, who they lost a series to Arkansas, is up to number 1 now. The SEC is just it's a gauntlet. Everyone's good. Everyone's good. So that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
I think that's it for now. We'll be back with Colin later this week on Thursday. Haven't talked to him in a few weeks on the show because of the break and everything. So we have a lot to catch up with on the recruiting side. And, of course, we'll talk about the visitors coming in for the Crimson Combine, all that good stuff. So we'll preview all that on Thursday. Like I said, full coverage from Norman on a Saturday for the Crimson Combine. And then James, Tom, myself will be back next Monday to wrap it all up, wrap up spring ball, what we learned over the last month or so. We'll get into all that on the show next Monday. Of course, recap Diamond Sports, all that good stuff as per usual as well. So that's it for now. For Tom Green earlier, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. Signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.